Hi, I'm Sean.
I'm Rhonda.
Now let's talk about some of the scriptures where it deals with when someone has wronged you and just a perspective I think that we need to have in the way that we need to look at that, particularly in the marriage relationship.
So say there's that forgiveness, reconciliation, moving forward to rebuild trust. You know, Luke 6:27-28 says, "Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you." That's a good moving on scripture, isn't it? Especially
Yeah.
if someone is repentant
Yeah.
and wanting to change.
Yeah. What if we apply that in our marriage? Say your spouse has wronged you, they've done something that offended you, something that made it was hard for you to get over that. He said to love your enemies. I mean, how much more would you love your
Exactly.
spouse? And to pray for them. Are we
Yeah.
praying for our spouse? Are we praying, God, help them to understand, to see, to understand the impact of what they've done and how that's affected me?
And I can see that this could apply to just everyday little things that happen.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you'll see spouses get on the warpath over these things in life that nobody meant to do anything bad, but boy, you took it bad
Yeah,
and
yeah.
ran with it. So can you imagine doing good in response to someone that you think did something bad to you?
Yeah, he said, bless those that curse you. If you feel like your spouse did something that's really set you back, are you doing good in return to them? This is what Jesus is teaching us, is to not to return evil for evil, but to return good for evil.
So Romans 12:14, bless those who persecute you, bless and do not curse.
So if you feel like your spouse is attacking you, and again, we're not saying that your spouse is your enemy or that your spouse really is attacking
No.
you, but we can feel that way sometimes.
And if this would apply to an enemy, like Sean said a while ago, how much more to someone that we have a relationship with?
Yeah.
So if we thought our spouse was persecuting us intentionally, and this is usually not the case once
No.
we start breaking these things down, what would we do? We would bless.
It's changing the way we see things. We can create an interpretation of what's coming to us, and we can think that this is what's happening, but we need to change the way we look at it. So the next one we want to look at is do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult, but with blessing, because to this you were called, so that you may inherit a blessing. This is 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 9. So you can see that God has not really given us we haven't seen anything yet where He's saying, you need to go out there and you need to really curse those people that are doing evil.
Get 'em back.
Yeah, get them back. And I remember the children's Bible that our children were using years ago, and it had a picture of Jesus after He was resurrected, standing before His disciples, and He had a smile on His face. He had holes in His hands and a wound in His side, and He didn't come back and say, yeah, I'm going to get those Pharisees and Romans that hung me on that tree. No, He came back with a smile on His face, and He wasn't hung up over the bad things that people did to Him that put Him on that tree.
And if it's really not I that lives, but Christ that lives in me, I'm supposed to let Jesus express through me.
Man.
It's not from me to express.
These are things we just need to be reminded of periodically and get our perspective straightened out and the way we see things.
And so don't repay evil with evil or insult with insult. If you thought your spouse did something negative to you, you're not supposed to do negative in return. You're not supposed to do something that would be evil or insulting that from their perspective either.
Yeah.
And sometimes, couples will act as if,
Yeah.
well, if my spouse did that to me, this is how I'm going to
Yeah,
respond.
yeah. Sometimes we call that tit for tat.
Yeah, but we're supposed to bless.
Yeah.
Because we're called to blessing that we may inherit blessing.
Yeah.
And so we issue out, blessings come out from us. We don't have
Yeah.
curses and
Yeah.
insults to issue out.
Yeah.
Because what's inside of us is supposed to be pure and holy and God's blessing on them.
And what do we say sometimes is to take the high road, right? Somebody
Yeah.
else may be doing something undercutting, but that doesn't mean that's what you do and repay that in return. So let's look at in Romans chapter 12 and verse 18, he said, if it's possible, as much as it depends on you, live at peace with all men. So this is something that He's called us to, is to do everything that we can do. You're not responsible for your neighbor, or you're not responsible for what your spouse does. You're responsible for what your behavior is toward them.
And it says, as much as it depends on you. And I think that a lot depends on us.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of room that, how it says a soft answer turns away wrath. The way we respond will either irritate our spouse and make that conflict really rev up, or it can soften and mend that and silence the conflict so we can actually hear a heart and talk through an issue.
Man, there's so much that we can do to bring peace and not also whittle away at the relationship.
And so the children of God are peacemakers. We're supposed to be makers of peace.
And I like this next one. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Romans chapter 12 again, verse 21. Man, that is so powerful that we don't resort to... that's not in our toolbox. That's not a tool that we find in there to go and pull out to do anything with. He didn't give that to us as one of the resources that we use.
And so if our spouse behaves in a way that we would define as evil, will I be overcome by that? Will I be drawn into that as well? And now we're both acting that way. How then could I fault my spouse and say, look at what you did, if I'm doing it also?
Yeah.
But I'm not supposed to allow that to overcome me, but instead I overcome that evil with good. So instead of being overcome, I'm an overcomer, because greater is He that's in me than he that's in the world. So the good and the authority that flows out from the expression of Jesus Christ in this relationship overcomes that which my spouse might have done that was not good.
We know the phrase, two wrongs don't make a right. And so if your spouse or anyone for that matter does wrong to you, that is in no way invites you to return evil for evil.